Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where our mission is to join together to create a nourishing, liberal, religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world, or as we like to say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. I want to welcome all of you to this space today. I want to embrace all that you bring with you, all of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, your background, your lifestyle, your experiences, your differences, everything that helps make you who you are is welcome here this morning. And this includes those who hear me say this each Sunday. Is an important part of our start, as well as those who might be joining us for the first time today. You're equally as welcome and appreciated. And of course, it also means those who are streaming live with us this morning. We're also so glad that you are here. So welcome to one and all. Got a few announcements to make before we move into our greeting of one another. I want to start with, did we have a board announcement today? We don't. Okay. That'll save us a little bit of time. I do want to put in another plug for religious education volunteers. You can sign up for that in the back between services. And really, if you have not yet donated to our annual community auction, I hope that you will do that. We need to get as many items in for that as possible. Those are kind of services and whatnot that people donate, as you know, annually. Some of the examples are how to make your yard a bird butterfly sanctuary, how to make your favorite liquor, so quite a contrast there, cooking classes, dinners, those sort of things. So any kind of thing you might want to donate that would help with this fundraiser would be much appreciated. Okay, so I know we probably have some special guests here today who have come because you know that the Reverend Dr. Matthew Fox has been with our community this weekend and is going to be our speaker this morning. He is in the house. If you haven't noticed yet, he's going to sit on the floor for a while so that he can enjoy the service until he speaks. But I wanted to thank those who helped bring him here to our community. It's been a tremendous weekend. That includes One Path's Many Peace and the Unity Spiritual Center. How many of you from those organizations are here this morning during our first service? Nobody. Okay. Forget that. Forget I said thank you. Oh, there you are. Thank you. No, we're so grateful for you helping to make this happen. Matthew Fox is an incredibly special human being, and anyone who gets to hear him and learn from his wisdom is going to be blessed and transformed. So I'm not going to say much about Matthew Fox's background by way of introduction, because I think his reputation really does precede him. A lot of you know a lot about him. I spoke about him and his work 2 weeks ago for our congregation. So I just wanted to take a few moments here at the start of our service to actually introduce Matthew Fox to this pulpit, because this is a really incredible pulpit. I started to share a little bit with you in the foyer as we were looking over the history, but the reason I'm so glad that you are here is because, like so many of the people who've stood in this pulpit, you are a heretic. And as you reminded me yesterday, being a heretic is not a bad word. It means you think for yourself. And it really is a word that means to choose. And some authorities in the past and in the present have chosen to call those who choose to think for themselves, to choose what they think, heretics. So it's not really a bad word for those who believe in thinking for yourself. Matthew Fox, who's written lots of books, and by the way, you can look at some of them and purchase some of them during our social hour after the service, wrote a book back in 1983 called Original Blessing, as opposed to, say, Original Sin. And its message is one that the earth is good. It's not a fallen thing, but a beautiful thing, an extraordinary thing that manifests divinity that we can experience anytime we're in it, part of it, recognize we're part of it, and that human beings are not born depraved, but also have innate goodness within us. And that got him into a lot of trouble. He was soon silenced, and he doesn't quite get the definition of silence. It's because he's continued to speak. It got him fired from his teaching position, and then 10 years later, actually expelled from his Dominican order. And you think about that, and he's an incredibly positive person who's taken this opportunity to do a lot of great things, but I know personally, I just can't imagine what it was like to go through that for 10 years and beyond. That's a long struggle to deal with authorities that are coming after you. So he is a heretic, and he is here, and he is at the tail end of a line now of Edwin Willock, our first minister who came in 1888. By the way, our church, I will remind you, part of its bylaws said that there shall be no censure for heresy in 1887. That was in our bylaws. And they got Edwin Willock here, who came to us with a bounty on his head from the state of Virginia, wanted dead or alive, for speaking favorably of John Brown, the abolitionist. That was our first minister. In 1911, John Dietrich came, the only minister ever convicted of heresy by the Dutch Reformed Church in Pennsylvania. And when he became a heretic, we said, "Come be our minister." And he came here. That's right. That's right. And he founded. He discovered really the word humanism with a capital H and became the father of religious humanism. I'm going to jump way ahead to the 1960s when Rudy Gilbert, who was here for many, many, many years, was courageous enough to become one of the first ministers who had a very bold voice against Vietnam just at its start. And he got flack both from outside of Unitarianism and inside of Unitarianism for that courage that he spoke about so boldly and with such passion. He was a heretical figure. And then, of course, Reverend Bill Houth. This guy was incredible. He came here as a chemist who wanted to do something where he could be more in touch with people, so he was switching careers, but he ended up using his chemist background to prove that the Hanford nuclear plant was creating radiation that was spreading downwind, so to speak, the downwinder problem in our water and in our airway. And he was able to eventually force the government, with the help of the Hanford Education Action League that he helped start, to release 20,000 pages of documents proving what he had discovered, and ended up shutting down 3 years later the last nuclear reactor in our country, the reactor that the plutonium for the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs was manufactured at. Incredible heretic who was not afraid to take on the establishment. And then me. For those who haven't been paying attention, I recently wrote a book, and it's gotten me into a lot of trouble with some, but I should say, in addition to being banned from the General Assembly and censured by the UU Ministers Association, the book is now being referred to as the Egloffian Heresy. So it's official that I'm one of your heretics. And just last month, that we made history in this pulpit when Rabbi Michael Davis came from Chicago, and I talked with the director of the UUs for Justice in the Middle East, the national director, this week, and he said this was the first time that a rabbi spoke in favor of Palestinian rights during a Unitarian Universalist worship service. We made history here. So I just wanted you to know about this special pulpit that you're going to be speaking in today, and that you are in a long line of prestigious heretics, and you're making history for us today. So please welcome Matthew Fox for the first time this morning to our congregation. Thank you, and we will enjoy hearing you speak to us later. And I tell you what, I got a little long-winded, so rather than greeting each other right now, we'll wait till social hour, and we'll move forward, because I want to give Matthew as much time to speak today as he needs, because he's never long-winded, no matter how long he speaks. I can tell you that. So let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our faith, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world, and a beacon of hope to those in need. And may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found. One of my, a lot of favorite books that Matthew Fox has written, but as a minister, this is a great resource, One River, Many Wells, because it is a book in which he points out and celebrates the common teachings between many traditions. And so it's an excellent read, but also it's a volume that contains a lot of readings from a variety of traditions. So it's a useful tool on Sunday mornings often. So I'm going to start with this as our opening words this morning. A couple of passages from Taoism. When you have names and forms, know that they are provisional. When you have institutions, know where their functions should end. Knowing when to stop, you can avoid any danger. Look, and it can't be seen. Listen, and it can't be heard. Reach, and it can't be grasped. Seamless, unnameable. It returns to the realm of nothing. Form that includes all forms. Image without an image. Subtle, beyond all conception.
Our first in-service hymn of this morning is adapted from words from St. Francis of Assisi. It's number 1066 in your turquoise hymnal, or of course the words are on the screen. Please rise as you're willing and able for O Brother, Son.
In tenderness
It is time now for our story for all ages. And you're welcome to come up to the front of the church if you would like. Here is a favorite for many of us here around Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, our buddy Purple. Hello. Purple, it's been quite some time since we've seen you. How have you been? I'm doing okay. Well, good. I understand you started school last month. Yes. Feels like school's been going on forever with this cold weather. Yes. Well, how are you liking school? Oh, not so much. Not so much? What's going on? My teacher's calling me names. Your teacher's calling you names? Yeah, every day. Oh, that sounds terrible. Your teacher's calling you names. You sure it's not the other kids? No, it's my teacher. Well, what is your teacher calling you, if you don't mind my asking? He calls me Joseph, Alan, Elizabeth, Cindy, Jonathan. Wait a minute now. That sounds odd names to be calling you. Are you sure your teacher's not just naming the other kids in the classroom? No, because the other kids, every time he speaks, they say, here. So they hear him doing it. Oh. No, actually, I think they're saying here he's doing roll call, but, you know, it reminds me of my daughter Cassidy when she was about your age. She changed her name every day, sometimes several times a day. She'd call herself Madison or Hannah or Heather or Rebecca. She was always changing her name. Oh, how come? Well, I don't think she liked being put into a box. Oh, you mean like the box I came in? Yeah, kind of like the box you came in. I'm glad you busted out of it. But that reminds me of yet another story, an old story of a fellow who was climbing up in the mountains one day, enjoying the beauty of nature, when all of a sudden he noticed a bush on fire. Yes, the bush was on fire, and believe it or not, the bush started talking to him. That's interesting. Yes, it is interesting. And he asked the bush's name, and the bush said, "My name is whatever I want it to be, because I keep changing." Yeah, it was a very strange talking bush, if you're going to have a talking bush, because it didn't even have a name. Well, anyway, it turned out that this fellow, whose name was Moses, had a big job to do. Moses had to help a lot of people cross a very long, hot, dangerous desert, and they didn't have a map. In fact, they didn't even have a GPS. So, the burning bush decided that it would help them cross the desert, and it decided that during the day it would be a cloud, and they could follow the cloud. And at night it would be a big ball of fire. Now, clouds and fire keep changing form. And this nameless, magical being was a being who kept changing its form, and the people were not afraid to follow something so nebulous, something that was like fire, ever-changing. And I think it's a good example of how we sometimes need to get out of our own box, think of ourselves beyond the definitions that have been placed upon us, and be able to learn to trust the mystery, and to step into it and to follow it. Oh, do you understand what I'm saying, Purple? I think so, except my name is Adam, and Jennifer, and Jonathan. Okay, very good. Say goodbye. Goodbye. We're now going to get to hear some very special music while we have this morning's offering, which we now receive with great gratitude as it helps sustain this community and our mission to the wider world. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
I have to say that was very beautiful and more than enough for one service, and I can't believe we get to hear you again coming up in just a few moments. So thank you so much. Yeah. We are now going to kindle our candles of care on behalf of those who are most on our thoughts and minds this morning. I want to begin with a candle for church member Dave Weaver, who had heart surgery earlier this week. He's doing okay. And also for our members, Dale and Jeanette Liljegren. Their daughter, who's been dealing with cancer, passed away last week. And they also let me know that another daughter has been diagnosed with a very early stage. They found a spot by accident during another medical procedure. So things are looking really good that they're going to be able to get on top of this. But you can imagine how they must be feeling right now. So please think of them and their entire family. Let's take a moment of silence on behalf of others that you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. Those named aloud and those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. Here's another reading from the Kabbalah, found in One River, Many Wells. Be totally alone. Do it at night. Empty your mind of all mundane vanities. Be filled with the awe of Shekinah. Wear clean garments, all white, focusing your awe and love. Light many candles until your eyes shine brightly. Then you are ready to receive the abundant flow, and the abundant flows upon you, arousing you again and again. Now turn your thoughts to visualizing the name. I'm now going to invite Matthew Fox to the pulpit to share a reading with you.
Well, I feel I should
kiss this hot pulpit. So much history. Beautiful to hear, beautiful to hear. And there's more to come, I'm sure. So I chose as a reading a passage from my introduction to my book, Naming the Unnameable. And this passage is from David Bentley Hart, a contemporary Orthodox theologian from the Greek Orthodox tradition, teaches at Notre Dame these days. He wrote a book called The Experience of God, Being, Consciousness, Bliss. And it was highly recommended to me by my friend Rupert Sheldrake, the British biologist. And here is part of what Hart says. Any debate over an intelligent designer or supreme being within space and time who merely supervises history and legislates morals, or a demiurge whose operations could possibly be rivals of the physical causes describable by scientific cosmology, most definitely has nothing whatsoever to do with the God worshipped in the great theistic religions, or described in their philosophical traditions, or reasoned toward by their deepest logical reflection upon the contingency of the world. We should leave 17th century deism and 18th century natural history aside. The reason the very concept of God has become at once so impoverished, so thoroughly mythical, and ultimately so incredible for so many modern persons is not because of all the interesting things we've learned over the past few centuries, but because of all the vital things we have forgotten. Because of all the vital things we have forgotten. Above all, somehow, we have as a culture forgotten being. Being, the self-evident mystery of existence. How has this happened? Perhaps this is attributable not only to how we have been taught to think, but how we've been taught to live. Late modernity is, after all, a remarkably shrill and glaring reality, a dazzling chaos of the beguilingly trivial and terrifyingly atrocious. A world of ubiquitous mass media and constant interruption, an interminable spectacle whose only unifying theme is the imperative to acquire and spend. We have little time to reflect upon the mystery that manifests itself not as a thing among other things, but as a silent event of being itself. The silent event of being itself. In our quest to master being, we have ventured very far indeed away from being.
I don't know how you follow that, but we'll try. The first piece we played was by, we were invited to play. I spoke with Pastor Eckloff and told him how many wonderful things he has said that have been influential to my life. And he said, he once gave a talk about hidden figures. The first piece we played is a true hidden figure of Western music, Florence Price. And we're going to play some of her music on Monday at 7 here at the church. The piece that we're going to play for you now is a piece written in gratitude to Lake Pend Oreille, and is a piece that we often take when we go and play outside of this community. It's called Spirit of the Ancient Lake, and we offer it to you and to our distinguished guest this morning. This is Spirit of the Ancient Lake that we wrote and was inspired by Lake Pend Oreille.
Thank you very much, musicians. I'm proud to say that one of my 89 names in this book for the divine is music. God is music. And I actually got that from Hildegard of Bingen, who says, "Who is the Trinity? You are music. You are life, source of everything, creator of everything." And Rupert Sheldrake, the scientist, says, "If there were a galactic mind, then it might well hear a kind of planetary, stellar, and galactic music. For music can link us to musical minds far greater than our own, and ultimately to the source of life itself." So I hope that you're proud of your vocation as musicians. And we are, who can listen to good music. Gabriel Marcel, the French philosopher, says, the artist is not just the musician, the dancer, the poet, but the people, or the painter, the people who take in the painting, take in the music, take in the poetry. That too is art. And that too is where we all stand up as artists and co-creators. Musicians who didn't have ears listening would be pretty lonely people. So I want to thank Doug for his invitation to join this wonderful line of heretics at this pulpit and to be with you today to talk about my latest book called Naming the Unnameable, 89 Wonderful and Useful Names for God, including the Unnameable God. This is my most radical book, but I didn't set out to write a radical book. I just set out to write a book that opened up the doors of our minds and hearts to the immense variety of the faces of the divine and names of the divine. The ancient Vedas of India say that God has 1,000,000 faces, 1,000,000 names. But it was a number of years ago when I was writing my book on Thomas Aquinas, the 13th century scientist and theologian and Dominican, which I was for 34 years. And he had this amazing passage. This had never been translated before. It was in his commentary in Denis's Areopagite, the 6th century Syrian monk. And he takes Denis's book on the divine names. It's called On the Divine Names, written in the 6th century. And Denis has 42 names for God taken from the Bible alone. Names like rock and stone and sun and dew and moon and truth and justice. 42 of these names. And at the end of listing the names, Thomas Aquinas says, every being is a name for God, and no being is a name for God. If every being is a name for God, we're talking trillions upon trillions upon trillions of names for God. So we're outdoing the Vedas. 1,000,000, that's just a drop in the bucket. Every being is a name for God. I was just stunned by that. It is so radical, and it so opens the mind up. When I was telling Brian Swim, the cosmologist, about this book, he said, stop, the top of my head is coming off. And that has been the response of a lot of scientists to this book. They were the first ones who jumped on it. Because one reason is that I draw from a lot of science in the names I come up with. See, I'm only offering 89, you see, out of trillions. So, be cool. You can find your own. And I want to give credit, too, to the Sufi tradition, which has this practice, which I practiced for many years, called the 99 Most Beautiful Names for God. And I would often go down the street, walking my dog, and praying these 99 names. I wouldn't do all 99, but I'd kind of do a few, and then I'd go leaping off into some other name. So it was that practice that got me into this whole project. And of course, I stopped at 89 because I didn't want to compete with the Sufis in any way. I acknowledge their very forward practice. But I met a young physicist, for example, when I was writing the book, and he did a seminar in his basement. And he was talking about his main interests, which are synchronicity and flow. In the middle of his talk, he had this one short sentence. He said, for me, flow is God. And then he went on. And needless to say, that caught my attention immediately. So flow has certainly made this book. And in fact, he responded to it. So there are so many names that are emerging from today's science. That's one of them. Another one that I'm very partial to is God is the mind of the universe. Eric Jantsch, the physicist who wrote the classic work, Self-Organizing Universe, he says that toward the end of his book. He says, for me, God is the mind of the universe. And he said, now, mystics have often written about this and spoken about this, but now that a scientist is saying it, It's going to reach more deeply into the culture and into the contemporary mind. Another scientist, Aaron Weiler, says God is a planetary mind field. God is a playing intelligence. The scriptures say God is the one in whom we live, move, and have our being. A very panentheistic naming of God, which comes from the book of Acts. God is the universe, say some. Deepak Chopra says God is the self of the universe. And that he makes the point that if divinity is infinite and our minds aren't infinite, we cannot really name God. Now, this is how Rupert Sheldrake, the British biologist, responded to this book. And I know Rupert well. We've written 2 books together, one on angels called The Physics of Angels, and one called Natural Grace. And Rupert is very brilliant, but he's very contained. He's very British in that regard. And yet his response to this book was exclamations. I've never seen him write exclamations before. How refreshing. Fox shows how we can think about God in so many different ways, freeing our minds and liberating our imaginations. It is easy not to believe the narrow conception of God that atheists do not believe in. It's a wonderful sentence. It's easy not to believe the narrow conception of God that atheists do not believe in. But it is hard not to be inspired by a God who is energy, one of my definitions, breath, life, flow, love, joy, and the cause of wonder. This book is timely, important, and admirably brief. That's important to Rupert. The theologians write admirably brief books. It is also open-ended. There are always more names to come, and none can exhaust God's name. And that is so true. This is like a springboard, these 89 names, to invite others to come up with their experiences of the burning bush, of the wanting experience of beauty itself. Nancy Abrams, who wrote with her husband Joel Primack a very fine book on the new cosmology, she says, is there objectively a God? What God even means explodes in this little book like fireworks in the mind. And that's what Deepak Chopra said about this book. He said this book is really a practice. It's a practice. Because I just take one name, say that God is music, and maybe a paragraph calling in Hildegard, calling in Rupert in that particular instance, and leave it to you to continue your meditation. But the point is that there are so many fireworks that go off in our mind once we take the lid off the notion that the God we're talking about is the God we stamp on our dollar bills, our coins, and our MX missiles. Once we divorce divinity from all the idols that our culture has nailed the divine into, and let our minds and our hearts swim again in the context of the divine. Now, you might say that there are packages in this book around different notions of divinity. For example, the divine feminine is is celebrated. First, the God is the goddess. And of course, the goddess, as Marija Gimbutas points out, feminist theologian, anthropologist, the goddess in all her manifestations was a symbol of the unity of all life and nature. Her power was in water and stone, tomb and cave, animals and birds, snakes and fish, hills, trees, and flowers. Not unlike the song we sang as we began, out of the tradition of St. Francis. God is Tara. Tara, of course, is the Tibetan name that means both star and tear. Star and tear. So the Divine Mother in Mahayana Buddhism is named Tara, the Mother of Compassion. God as Kuan Yin, also the Bodhisattva of compassion. God is Oshun, one of the traditions of Africa, where she is called the Ma'am of all waters on earth, in the heavens. She rests in the silver light of the moon, symbol of the feminine principle. God is Isis. Of course, Isis gives birth in Europe to the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna, God as the Black Madonna. She's having a tremendous comeback today, by the way. A lot of people having dreams of the Black Madonna. God as Kali, which is really the Black Madonna of the East. God as Mary. God as the Brown Madonna, Our Lady of Guadalupe. God as Shekinah. And God as Gaia, Mother Earth. So these are a few of the feminine names for the divine. But another side to the divine, these names come from the God of light, and included would be God as beauty, God as light. God is the unity of all things. Rumi says, I know nothing of two worlds. All I know is the one. I seek only one. I know only one. I find only one. And I sing of only one. So that wanting of things, which is what mystical experience is, tasting that wanting, that is the Shema, that is the prayer of who God is. God is the one that binds all things. And God is the cause of wonder. Rabbi Heschel has a powerful passage. He says, being fills us with wonder, for there is an immense preciousness of being. It is not an object of analysis, but a cause of wonder. Who lit the wonder before our eyes and the wonder of our eyes? We are struck by an unmitigated wonder. We ask about the universe, who could believe it? Who can believe this universe? Who could conceive it? And how shall we ever reciprocate for breathing and thinking, for sight and hearing, for love and achievement? Because of being, an awareness of the divine intrudes first as a sense of wonder. And Einstein said, there is no true science which does not emanate from the mysterious. Every thinking person must be filled with wonder and awe just by looking up at the stars. So these are all examples of the God of light, the cataphatic divinity. But the last 9 names that I propose come from the tradition of the epiphatic divinity, the God without a name. Meister Eckhart says, God is superessential darkness, who has no name and will never be given a name. So this is a nameless divinity. And I think there's an especial need for this today, because I think many people have been overwhelmed with God talk, much of which is quite godless when you examine it carefully. Eckhart says, no one can really say what God is. No one can really say what God is. The ineffable one has no name. So it is part of our experiences of the divine. William James says part of mysticism is ineffability, that we're without words. That's what awe is. Awe renders us wordless. Job, in the culmination of his struggles and all, when God reminds him, where were you, Job, when I created the contours of the earth, of the waters, the lions, the mountain goats? Where were you? And Job ends up putting his hand over his mouth. It shut Job up. That's what awe does. It takes us back to silence. And then, if we're lucky, to music and to art. They always say the only proper languages for mystical experience are either silence or art. And this is really what all the mystics are telling us. Remember, too, that what Aquinas said. He said, every being is a name for God, and no being is a name for God. So in that one sentence, he is encapsulating the cataphatic divinity of light, which we see in all beings, all trillions of them, and he's also warning us that even that does not get us to the real name. So one of the epiphatic names for God is God the uncreated one. Deepak Chopra puts it this way: God is uncreated. The universe cannot reveal God since everything that exists is created. Let's assume that God is infinite. Our minds are not equipped to perceive the infinite. We perceive what we are prepared to see and to know. God is the great mystery. Hart, whom I read during our reading, says that we need to reflect upon the mystery that manifests itself not as a thing among other things, but as a silent event of being itself. We approach mystery only when we surrender ourselves to it. The mystery is not something we latch onto, we control. It requires surrender of us, a kind of letting go. I heard a joke recently. What I most dislike about atheists is that they're so busy talking about God all the time. So I think atheists, I invite atheists to read this book too. I think it will encourage them to be more imaginative. And also it gives them a lot more bullseyes to throw a dart at. Because a lot of atheists really are setting up a straw God to shoot down. So if you're a smart atheist, and I know a lot of atheists who are smart, and even more who think they're really smart, you should read a book like this and get straight what is the God you're saying no to. Because a lot of atheism is anti-theism. Well, I gave up theism decades ago. And I've been writing about panentheism, which is anti-theism, for as long as I've been writing. So, don't be a dumb atheist, be a smart atheist. And get in touch with the real theological tradition if you want to reject it. And, or even if you want to be skeptical about it. But don't take the everyday version of religion to make a straw man out. It's just too easy. You're smarter than that. Thich Nhat Hanh says, we know the Holy Spirit as energy, and not as notions, and not as words. So for him, God is energy, and it cannot be captured by words and notions. In fact, he says, the theologians I like are the ones who never talk about God. That's Thich Nhat Hanh speaking from his Buddhist perspective. The Dalai Lama was interviewed a couple of years ago by a journalist, and the journalist said, do you believe in God? Dalai Lama paused, and he said, well, yes, I do. And the journalist said, well, are you sure? A lot of Buddhists don't use the name God, and they're not at home with it. And what kind of a God do you believe in? And the Dalai Lama paused, thought for a while, and he said, I believe in the God of Thomas Merton, which is a fun answer, since I knew Thomas Merton, and he's the one that got me in all my trouble, because he's the one who told me to study in Paris, and that's where I learned all my heresies, beginning with Père Chanou, one of the founders of liberation theology. The idea that God is nothingness. Meister Eckhart says, God is a being beyond being and a nothingness beyond being. a changeless existence, and a nameless nothingness. Thomas Aquinas said, God is said to be non-being, not because God is lacking in being, but because God is beyond all beings. Father B. Griffiths, who lived in India for over 50 years, said, we cannot name Brahman. It is not this, not this. Whatever word we use, whatever image, whatever concept, we have always to go beyond. One cannot stop with any name of God. We are all seeing that inexpressible mystery beyond, and that is Brahman, which is neti neti, not this, not this. And Jesus talked this way. He said, the kingdom of God is not here or there. It's not a thing. It is within you and among you. It's what we give birth to, therefore. And it's not a thing. It is a process that is going on. The Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical work of the Middle Ages, says God is ayin, nothingness. This is more existent than all the being of the world. There's more nothingness than there is being. And the Jewish tradition talks about God as Ein Sof, which means that which thought cannot comprehend. God as the annihilation of thought. So really, this puts the divine presence, the divine experience, entirely out of the left brain, left hemisphere of the brain, and into the right hemisphere of the brain. It is about experience, it's about intuition. If God is the erasure of all thoughts, then meditation is an emptying of the mind and becomes fruitful, connecting us to the One. And then, of course, as was just read by Doug, the Tao Te Ching. God is seamless, unnameable, returns to the realm of nothing. And that includes all forms, image without an image, subtle beyond all conception. And then my number 89, the last one, is God is silence. God is silence. Meister Eckhart says, nothing in all creation is so like God as silence. He says, quit flapping your mouth about God. Quit flapping your mouth about God, he says. Speak from the inner wealth of silence. To maintain total silence, be about that which is the source of all things, the ground of hearing, the ground of being. The word lies in the soul, he says, unknown and unheard, unless room is made for it in the ground of hearing. Otherwise it is not heard. All voices and sounds must cease. There must be pure stillness within, a very still silence. And Rumi, the great Sufi mystic, says, secretly we spoke, that wise one and me. I said, tell me the secrets of the world. He said, shh. Let silence tell you the secrets of the world. So I think that to call for a liberation of the divine names within ourselves is really to call forth a revolution in our thinking, in our acting, in our feeling, and in our being. And I look forward to the creativity that can come from all that. Thank you.
Believe it or not, we have a hymn in our hymnal, in our hardback hymnal, that actually will start us on the path that our speaker has spoken of today. And it's number 23, Bring Many Names, and let it start the opening of your mind about these ideas. Please rise as you're willing and able.
Man, we finally had a song in our hymnal that matched our sermon.
Yes.
That's great. You really did make history today. So, yesterday, Matthew showed some of us an exercise that I think I'd like to close with as our benediction. And he just basically put his hands in front of our heart and feel the energy of your heart pushing through your hands, and let your hands be the expression of your compassion. That's our benediction. Peace. Salam alaikum. Shalom.
Shalom.